Hello, and welcome to Post Games, a podcast about how and why we love video games. My name is Chris Plant, and I am so happy to have you here. Before we get started today, I'd like you to remember this. Video games are fun. They're little escapes from life's doldrums and setbacks. Even video games with really heavy themes have the potential to make our lives better. Just ask anybody with a Silent Hill tattoo. I say all of this because on today's Post Games, we're talking about the thing video games most often ignore: death. Honestly, it's strange how rarely video games acknowledge death, considering that the medium would be totally bankrupt if the Grim Reaper ever collected royalties. Since January, I've killed space aliens, robots, and zombies. My human body count includes the elderly, the young, and clones of myself. I've died from death rays, a variety of vehicular incidents, and a particularly embarrassing stumble off the side of a mountain. I've been obliterated, incinerated, and defenestrated. But games rarely stop to ask what all this death means. Instead, we might get a game over screen or an instantaneous warp to the most recent checkpoint, which, honestly, I appreciate. Games began as toys, and they mostly still are. We might want a break from life, but that doesn't mean we need to ponder death. Mario wouldn't be nearly as fun if I had to attend the funeral of every Koopa Troopa. And yet, this decade has, for me, been a series of tragedies. Cancer diagnoses, deaths, a miscarriage, close calls, me sleeping in the chair of a hospital ICU for 8 days straight. Experiencing death really closely, it's like learning a new word. You suddenly see it everywhere. So while I don't want every game to be about death, I have begun to wonder, maybe some of this virtual death could be put to good use. Perhaps an art form constructed on such a morbid foundation could help us make sense of, where we're all heading. You figure that games make our lives better, so why not make our relationship with death better too? For this episode, I invited video game writer and narrative director Kaitlin Tremblay to explain why they place death at the center of their games, which range from simulated mortuary work to serving on the cleanup crew for mass death events. What is it like to spend your workday thinking about the heaviest of all questions? And how can video games help us prepare for life's final level? I'm sorry. I normally resist those sort of puns. This week on Post Games, games about death improve our lives. Act 1, a life of making games about death. Act 2, how death in games can help us. A bonus act, why I keep playing this tiny game about dying, even after 18 years. And Act 3, the news of the week. I won't lie to you, it's a heavy show, but it's also a really uplifting one. The way that Kaitlin talks about death in video games, it really does make you feel more alive. Y'all, even exploring the end, it's so much better with your company. Let's get right to it. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. Oh, what do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. You're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup. Just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Kaitlin Tremblay writes video games about death. In Mortician's Tale, co-created with director Gabby Del Rienzo, bodies arrive on your office desk, an embalming table. It's your job to prepare the body, tend to guests at funerals, and organize your work emails. It is a job after all. Mortician Tale's follow-up, Seasonala Cemetery, was released last month for free. You visit a cemetery where you meet other guests and animals, read epitaphs, or simply enjoy a stroll through the final resting place of long-perished neighbors. Tremblay's upcoming project is her biggest writing credit to date. Ambrosia Sky is a first-person immersive sim that blends Power Wash Simulator with System Shock. One of the best elevator pitches I've ever heard. It was my first demo at Summer Games Fest, though I should admit right here I am unquestionably biased. I'm close friends with the game's director, Joel Burgess. But while I love my pal Joel, and I'm sure he will appear on this show at some point, after seeing the game, the person I most wanted to chat with was Kaitlin, to learn more about the game's story of a young woman who returns to her hometown to recover the remains of victims killed during a massive, tragic event. Something terrible has happened, and she doesn't know who of the people she loves, of the people she hates, of the people she's long since forgotten, has been impacted. We do eventually talk about Ambrosia Sky and its story about the people who, quote, clean mass death events. But first, we talk about, well, death. Why does death in video games interest you so much?
It's obviously a recurring motif for me in my work. There's a few reasons. I've encountered death a lot in my life, just generally. I've maybe experienced more death than is usual at this point of my life. And it's always really interesting to me the way people respond to death. There's so much depth and complexity and emotional range that happens in death that I find really interesting as both like a writer and a person, right? As somebody who's gone through death, as somebody who's had to support other people through death, nobody quite experiences it in exactly the same way. When you experience a really big death, everything anybody else has ever said about it doesn't fit. It doesn't feel right. It feels too shallow. It feels too cliche. It just doesn't capture your experience. And I think that's because death is so personal. I think I'm really interested in exploring and plumbing the depths of this personal aspect of it and like what is it that makes it feel so unique when it happens to you, even though it's not. It's something that happens to everybody and we all experience it in different ways. And so that on both a personal and creative level is really interesting to me. This uniqueness within this great universal experience.
I'm so interested in that challenge that you're talking about of talking about something that is universal and yet feels hyper individual, very personal. But my wife lost her best friend 10 years ago in just a freak accident. And I remember going through that. You love this person, and yet everything you say is useless. Even if you are saying the right thing, because it is so interior. We are married. We'd been married at that point for a long time. Even we had trouble communicating. To do that as an artist seems like such a challenge. I'm realizing as I say it why I wanted to talk about this, because it seems so difficult to make anything about this that resonates. Yeah, sorry, I'm like kind of having my own like a journey epiphany of, oh, so that's why we're doing this episode. It's going to be a lot of positivity towards death and how we talk about it throughout. But I did want to kind of first talk about where it doesn't work in video games, because I think death is so common in video games. I don't know, it's easy, I guess, to take for granted or to overlook. So what about death in video games doesn't resonate for you?
Yeah, I think when it's so inconsequential, it just doesn't fit for me, right? Like, I think there are moments of death in video games that are funny, that actually do work for me. And I think a little bit too of like environmental storytelling. Like, I played a lot of Sea of Thieves, and the way that they position their skeletons that you can find as part of puzzle mechanics, as part of flavor for the different islands that you go to explore to, and like some of the way these skeletons are posed are quite funny, and that works for me despite being like pretty antithetical to how I operate in my own craft. But it works because that's the intention, and it's not trying to be a serious commentary on death. It is trying to create this fantasy and this world where these things happen. And so finding skeletons at the bottom of pits or like crawling towards a water barrel, clearly having dehydrated in Sea of Thieves, really resonates for me because of what they're trying to accomplish with those deaths. It's a really intentional thing. They're not just there because they have to be there. They're there because they're doing something. And so I think for me, when death in games doesn't hit is when it's just an unexamined or an uncritically included part of the experience. You're not really thinking about what it's doing. You're not really having any sort of way to engage with, did I kill this person? Who killed them? What does it matter? What does it say to the world? And when it's just something that has to be there, I think that's when it's less interesting to me.
What is a game recently that you thought really effectively explored death?
Oh, Expedition 33, Claire Obscure.
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously, right? Like, it is about death. I'm surprised. For sure. I think what I liked about it, though, was that it wasn't just narratively exploring death. They do something where it takes the death of a character and really integrates it into the player emotional experience, how you then deal with like your progression path, your crafting, like your skills that you're unlocking, your party, like how you move through the rest of the game. And it was just a really interesting way to take this story moment, but then bring that into the actual like mechanical experience of how the players then have to continue playing post this character's death, that I thought was quite smart.
Yes. So in a recent letter series, you shared a video game death that you said, quote, rewrote part of my brain chemistry to make me who I am today as a creative. And it is not Final Fantasy VII's death, like so many millennials.
It is not.
Can you tell listeners what it was and how it impacted you?
This death that rewrote my brain is probably an NPC death that I would wager very few people in the world would even remember. It is the death of an NPC named Kira in the original Unreal game. But you hear about her early on. So in Unreal, you play as like a prisoner who is part of this prison ship, and you crash land on this alien planet, and you're just trying to survive and get off it. As you're progressing through the planet, you're finding all these text logs of previous military folks who were here before you. And as you're reading some of these text logs, some of them start mentioning Kira, and they start referencing how she was abducted by the hostile alien life, and they're trying to find her. And so as you're progressing throughout the game, you're reading a bunch of logs, and she's one of the few characters who's like consistently named throughout the game. And you learn a lot about her, right? Like you learn about who she was as part of the squad, you learn about how she's trying to save her life, you learn about, you know, like her acts of resistance while in captivity. And she kind of became this lifeline for me as I was playing the game. And I was like maybe 10 playing this game. Like I was really young. Following in the footsteps of her on this hostile alien planet became this like goal for me. It's like, oh, I'm alone here. She's been taken captive. Maybe I can find her. And maybe she's like my goal for how I can get out of here. Maybe she can help me. Maybe we can bond together and escape together. But that's not what happens. You follow all these breadcrumbs for her throughout the game. And then eventually in the latter half of the game, you find her at the top of a bell tower and she's dead. And you can read her final text log. And it just broke me a little bit because it was so impactful. I had put so much hope on finding her alive because reading her story really felt like the story that I was playing as the character going through Unreal. Finding her was this really big, impactful moment because it was like, oh, surviving here is not guaranteed. Like, I am alone. And it really reinforced a lot about the story and the themes of the game in a way that my little 10-year-old brain was like, wow, so cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think you were parsing this part at Tim, but I imagine I've thought about it a lot more as a game designer, which is on your journey to the top of that tower, you died countless times and you killed countless things. Why are some deaths in a video game still so effective when you're often surrounded in death and killing?
Yeah, I think it's when we attach something to it, right? Like player death for me is one of those things that like I barely even think about. It's like, yeah, I died. That's what happens. Player death kind of doesn't really mean anything to me in the grand scheme of like my emotional journey throughout the game, because the emotional journey is not about reconciling with my own mortality in these games. It's often about something else, right? And so I think the games where death really does have an impact on me is when that death is doing something really particular that only it can do, and that is given a lot of like space and weight. Like one of the other big deaths I think obviously is in Life is Strange. As you rekindle your relationship with Chloe, and as you go through the game, you talk a lot about Rachel Amber, you learn a lot about who she is, you learn a lot about what she meant to Chloe, but you never actually see her, you never actually meet her, and then you find her body and you dig her body up, and there's this huge emotional moment of like all of this love that you were building for this character just kind of comes crashing down around you. And so I think it's moments like that where like they really grapple with loss in a way that's like particular.
Okay, so we've made it to your current game. I think now is a good time to dig into it. Yeah. Give me the elevator pitch for Ambrosia Sky.
Yeah, so in Ambrosia Sky, you play as Dahlia. So she is a disaster cleanup specialist who is dispatched to this colony in the rings of Saturn that has been overcome by this alien fungal contamination. And so you know a lot of people have died. You don't know how many people have died, though. And your job is to go to this asteroid colony, clean up after the crisis, as well as find the victims of the crisis and lay them to rest. So you're kind of inhabiting this role that's a little bit modeled on real-world death cleaners, like people who go to places where people have died and clean up their apartment and take care of it and kind of take care of the space around death. So you're kind of doing this in the sci-fi setting.
Yes. I sincerely, I love a logic leap that is in the game's announcement post. I'm just going to read this to you for everyone else to hear. In the announcement, it was written, "When we first started thinking about Ambrosia Sky, we were initially interested in how we could blend the job sim, quote, style of gameplay, similar to Power Wash Simulator, with narrative-heavy exploration. This led to us to consider different forms of cleaning in the world, which in turn led us to death cleaners and individuals who clean up after a person passes away." Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't think most people are like, so we were looking into cleaning, and then we got into death cleaning. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got from we looked into cleaning to we looked into corpse removal?
I gotta be honest, I don't know. I think that's just how my brain works. It's like, obviously, like, oh, we're talking about cleaning. Do you know what's this really interesting cleaning job that exists?
Yeah. Do you remember, like, how that was received in the room? Are you surrounded by a bunch of people who kind of have... Morbidity isn't the right word for it, because I think that implies a certain negativity, but there are people who are comfortable with this and there are people who are not. So I'm curious, how did the rest of the team take that?
Yeah, everybody was pretty on board. I think I'm pretty lucky in that the folks who tend to want to work with me tend to share a lot of similar sentimentalities to me. So I think the leap from like cleaning to death cleaning is maybe not that surprising for folks that spend a lot of time with me. I think people were, at least to my face, people were really on board with it. And I think because the way we were also thinking about it too, right, is that death cleaning is this really interesting job that involves both like, you have to have some scientific know-how, right? It is cleaning, you are using chemical agents and things like this, and then we can combine that with undertaking and this kind of more spiritual side of death. And I think like talking about it that way, where it's like there's obvious mechanics that can come out of that was really exciting, and that kind of talk to each other in almost conflicting ways. But I think that conflict or that dissonance is actually really interesting.
I'm going to put a little dot on the spirituality friction there. I think we'll come back to that in a short bit. But I want to get back to this character and this setup, because you mentioned you're a death cleaner. You are going back to this colony that has been overtaken by this fungus. Tons of people have died. But one thing that really struck me when I was previewed the game was the character's connection with the setting. So could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this place, we call it the Cluster. The Cluster is actually where Dahlia was born. And so this is the place that she was born, she grew up, and that she left when she was about 15. And so she left under, like, pretty typical teenage circumstances of, like, I want to go find myself, I want to do my own things, I want to escape my stepmother's oppressive kind of control. And so she leaves when she's a teen. And she kind of leaves really quickly, really abruptly, and doesn't really have a lot of chance to, like, say goodbye to people or really kind of, like, talk about her decision. And so now it's about 15 or so years later is when she's coming back. So this is a homecoming story for her as much as it is a story of her doing her job. And it's her homecoming for the first time since she left. So there's a lot of emotional problems for her coming into this space, right? Like, first off, she's here to deal with death, which is always its own emotional landscape. But she's also not sure who's alive. Is her stepmother still alive? Is her old friend still alive? And she doesn't really know the extent of everything. And so she's here in this really emotionally tumultuous state that drives a lot of her reactions to what's going around.
When you are conceptualizing a character like this who is processing this sort of death, what scope are you digging into? Because I hear this, and I can think of my father who was a first responder, a paramedic in a small town. And I know that was always a thing of you never know who you're going to find when you open the door. Is it going to be a stranger or is it going to be somebody that you know? But then I also hear this, and it's hard not to think of, like, 9/11 first responders, where it's this thing of you are charging into this place that is unknown and the scale of it is unknowable. So are there kind of real-life analogs that you were turning to as you're researching the writing for something like this?
Yeah, and first responders is a great one, right? Like, particularly, like, disaster cleanup folks, so the people who do go to disaster areas to kind of help people survive is a big part of the early research as well, particularly around, like, national disasters. Or not natural, not national disasters.
Often both, sadly.
Often both, yeah. So there was a bit of that research, as well as just, like, a lot of research particularly into death cleaning as well. But I think for Dahlia, a lot of it kind of came from, like, a lot of, for me at least as a writer, the kind of weird emotional state that was a bit of a fallout of the pandemic of surviving through something that has a lot of mass death that changed a lot of people, that affected a lot of people's relationships. And I think in hindsight, there was a lot of that affecting how I was thinking about telling her story and what her emotional arc is going to be. Like, a big theme for the game is survivor's guilt, and how do you reconcile your survivor's guilt, and how do you forgive yourself for decisions that you've made, and how do you learn how to move on? And so I think actually a lot of that probably came from experience this, like, international event that we all lived through, and what it means to have lived through that event, I think exists there for sure.
Do you feel like we are seeing enough, is a judgmental word, do you feel like we are seeing a matching amount of fiction responding to this pandemic that we all went through, or do you feel it lacking?
I think it's interesting. I don't know if I feel like it's lacking or saturated yet. I think it's happening whether we know it or not, right? Like, I think there's an undeniable way in which it affected us, and I think that's coming out in the art we make, whether we mean to or don't mean to. Like, to be honest, like, I hadn't really thought about the role of the pandemic in Ambrosia Sky until right now in this conversation. And so I think it was really unconsciously there, because how can it not be? I will say, like, I do think I personally am somebody who benefits a lot from, like, seeing media grappling with the problems I'm grappling with. So I do have a hunger in me for more games that are kind of more directly contending with the fallout of the pandemic and everything that we went through. I do think there are some games that are tackling it or inspired by it quite poignantly. Like, I'm not sure if this is the case, but it feels like the case to me that 1,000 Times Resist has a lot of that pandemic DNA in it too.
Yeah. So this will be at least your third game about death. The first are projects with Gabby D'Arienzo, The Mortician's Tale, and Seasonala Cemetery. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yep.
Can you tell people a little bit about those two projects and what you hoped players would take away from those games' relationship with death?
Both of these games are Gabby's brainchild. Gabby has a really insightful and inspiring relationship to the way they think about death and the way they think about their art and their craft. So I'm always really honored and glad to get to work with Gabby on their games because I think they're quite poignant and wonderful. So A Mortician's Tale is about a funeral director. So you play as somebody who is running a funeral home in North America, and you have to do different parts of the job. You have to go through different steps like embalming or getting the body ready for cremation. And it's a really realistic set of steps that you have to do to prepare the body for burial. So that's one part of A Mortician's Tale. The other part is you have to attend funerals and talk to the mourners. And so you're there and you're listening to the family. You are a silent protagonist in A Mortician's Tale, so you're not saying anything back. It's all just about listening and being there. And then, of course, there's emails that you read and that kind of like get into a little bit of the politics of the North American funeral industry, because it is an industry and there are politics associated with it. And there's actually a lot of tensions and issues there within. And so we use the emails as a way to kind of get into that. And then Seasonala Cemetery is a game where you visit a cemetery that reacts to your computer's clock. So it knows the time of day, it knows the season, and it changes based on those facts. And you just wander around and you just have this really like zen chill experience in the cemetery. And it's inspired by real life cemeteries that we visited that exist here in Toronto that kind of function like public parks as well. And so Seasonala is this really beautiful chill experience of just spending time in a cemetery. So that's what those two games are. My hope, like what I was trying to achieve with them personally as like the writer on these was with A Mortician's Tale, I really wanted to get at that range of emotions that I was talking about earlier, right? Like the different ways that we respond to death. I really wanted to give voice to those. And I really wanted to be able to sit with and inhabit all the different ways death makes us feel and have the mourners express those. And so for me, A Mortician's Tale was really this lovely chance to talk through all of the weirdness that exists and all the different things you feel when you attend funerals and when people die around you and what funerals mean. It was also a good chance for me to learn and educate myself a lot on funeral practices in North America and understand a little bit more about like why it matters what I want to do with my body and the politics associated with it. And so I think Mortician's Tale was, from what I've been told by people who have played it, was quite successful on that end in terms of like really honoring the different ways we respond to death and that kind of the emotional range in it. With Seasonala, I really just wanted to tell interesting stories about dead people through the epitaph. So, right? So I wrote the gravestones, and those were some of my most favorite things I've ever written for video games, to be honest, because it was this really fun challenge of what do people typically write on gravestones? How can I use that to tell a little story about the person who died and how people feel about them? And it was really fun and interesting just thinking about what's the one or two epitaph way to kind of give personality to this person, let people know a little bit of who they were and what they meant to other people. And I just hope people find that compelling or interesting or comforting. I just wanted to give the dead memories and legacy and kind of honor that.
I completely get it. This might surprise some listeners, but writing obituaries is a pretty prized job among many journalists because they are, without being crass, they're quite fun to write. They are complete stories. They have an ending, and they are a time for assessment, and they are a time for narrative in a way that pretty much nothing else is in journalism. The point of journalism is it is flowing, it is open. I was speaking with my grandmother about this. She always reads the obituaries, and that always seemed so grim to me, especially as you got later and later in life. And as she pointed out, no, there's something really affirming to look at all the people around you and see they had a complete story. And then that helps prepare you for that idea that, like, I am coming to the end of a story rather than, like, some terrifying blankness. So, no, I completely get the appeal. I am curious, having returned to the topic this many times and using this medium, why games? Like, why not poetry or film or anything else? What is it about games that is so useful for exploring the topic?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think one is that games is my craft of choice right now. When I think about creativity, I often think in terms of games. But I think digging deeper is that I think there's something really lovely about the way in which games invite players in. I don't believe that games are the only way to have an interactive medium. I think a lot of art is interactive, and it depends what we mean when we say this. But I think there is something quite lovely about asking a person to cooperate and to like be a part of the story and to kind of like move through the space. And thinking particularly with Seasonala Cemetery, right? There's so much about the co-authoring relationship that happens between what I wrote and what the players experience that I think is really, really lovely, right? And like the order in which they read the graves or which NPCs they talk to or the experience that they're having brings something really particular to the experience that I can't engineer, right? I can just kind of create these lines for people to then bring themselves into and fill out and respond to. And I think that's what's really beautiful about games for me.
Yeah, that is so interesting because there's something about just the practicality of doing a thing gives you a different relationship with it than you will ever get from watching it being done or reading it. And you're right, Mortician's Tale, I completely changed how I want my body to be handled after this game by experiencing it and like seeing like having to do things to a body in a way that like I had read plenty about this. There were no ideas per se that were new, but the doing it was totally different. I am curious for you though. You have told these stories. What with Ambrosia Sky? What more is there to explore? I don't mean that in a reductive way, but what is it that you're like? I still have more than I want to poke at here.
Yeah, so the thing that's different with Ambrosia Sky for me is it's the first time where I get to write from the perspective of the dead. So both A Mortician's Tale and Seasonala is about our grief and how we respond to death around us. But with Ambrosia Sky, there's an opportunity there for me to actually write the way people feel about their own death. And so in the game, you find the victims of the crisis and you will do what we call death rites for them. And so you go up to them and you basically perform a sort of like fungal cremation. We call it bioremediation in the game. But while you're doing this, while you're laying them to rest, you get to listen to effectively their last will and testament, right? So it's these really short vignettes of the person talking about what their death means to them and why they wanted to participate in the program that their DNA is being collected for. So when Dahlia lays people to rest, she's collecting their DNA to analyze it to help her scarab group, the scarabs are what we call the death cleaners, to help them pursue immortality. And so these last wills were a way for me to reflect on what people feel about their own death. I think particularly for me right now where I'm at in my life, this is the part of death I'm interested in because I'm getting older and I'm terrified of dying. And so being able to write these last wills and explore what death means for the person dying is what's really interesting to me right now.
We're going to take a quick break. You and I won't at all, but we're going to hit a pause and the listeners will come back in a second. We're going to talk a bit more about the absolute terror of whatever comes next and also the grief that we feel because of that terror for everyone else. So we'll be right back after this. You said you're terrified of dying, which like, big same. How do you prevent yourself from bringing your work home with you when it's this topic?
I think about dying all the time. I mean, like, I don't think I stop.
Okay.
I think it was also like, it existed in my home far before the work existed. So.
Perfect. On that note, then, it's easy to read the work that you're doing as a form of therapy or like a means of processing. How has it helped you process this thing that, you know, is taking up a considerable portion of the real estate in your mind?
I think it helps me process because it gives me a place to kind of put it and look at it. And so instead of waking up at 3 a.m. horrified and staring down the void, I can kind of put those feelings in a place and I can look at them and I can make them knowable in a way that feels really positive and productive. So being able to write something comforting and being able to channel it that way keeps the demons at bay, so to speak. Yeah, I also think people expect me to be way better about death than I am in real life, but I'm still really bad at it. Like, it's hard. I mean, how do you be good at death, right? But like, it's something I'm deeply afraid of, and it's also something that it's still hard to support people within my day-to-day life as well, right? Like it somehow doesn't make me like the magical person that you can talk to about a death you're experiencing and you'll feel so much better afterwards. No, I'm awkward and weird.
Okay, apologies if this is too personal.
No,
but do you have a place where it hits you like reliably? Because for me, like when I'm on an airplane cross country, basically get me over 4 hours and I'm not afraid of a plane going down. Yeah. I just suddenly become aware. It's that a moment of awareness that you can resist. You just inherently resist. Is that a thing that you have? Is there a place where you are where it just hits you?
Yeah, it's usually when I can't sleep. It's usually when I'm in bed. And I notice this because it usually hits me in moments where I'm feeling really comfortable and safe. And then it's like, bang, you're going to die one day. It's like, okay, great, thanks. But yeah, I do notice it's usually, honestly, in my bed when I'm getting ready to fall asleep. And then like, it's often a response to how safe and secure I feel in my life. Like the happier and safer I feel, the more afraid I am of death. Because it's like, now I have so much to lose. And I think that's what makes it so scary for me is like, not the actual act of dying, but like what I have to lose is what's so scary to me.
I want to talk about the grief because the grief is so connected to this. I can relate to a lot of what you're talking about and that some people will come in contact with death at a rate that doesn't align with their life experience. And it's a very lonely and isolating feeling. And for me, my mother's 3 brothers, along with her parents, but they were older, so you expected that. But her 3 brothers all passed before they turned 55, and in pretty, I would say, upsetting ways.
Yeah.
And it all happened within the span of like 6 years. Yeah. And I remember both the fear, the death anxiety that has produced ever since, but also just the like profound grief. Because it takes so long to process one. And especially when you're very young and inexperienced, most people get a little bit more of an on-ramp. So I'm curious, one, for you, if there is any kind of personal stories that you're willing to share, and 2, more specifically, how whether it's playing games or making these things, how they have specifically helped.
Yeah, there's been a lot of death I've experienced, starting from when I was really young, like girls on my junior baseball team who died to bone cancer, or like family and the friends. The grief is always different, which is, I think, what's always kind of surprising is like the grief always feels different based on who they were and my relationship to them and what I'm grieving, right? Like I'm grieving them, I'm grieving my relationship to them, I'm grieving like the moments we won't have. But the death that I think about a lot recently is one that happened probably like 6-ish or so years ago of somebody who I had been close to and had kind of fallen out of touch with, but she was an important person in my life for really specific reasons. And she was out of the blue murdered by some random act. And it was really upsetting for a lot of reasons that would be upsetting. But the thing that I kept thinking about was she was somebody that I knew in part through mental health recovery and like particularly like eating disorder recovery stuff. And I just thought so much about how hard people in that type of recovery fight to live. I know you have to fight to want to live when you are in that sort of recovery. And then to have that taken away from you, it just broke me. And it was just like, I just couldn't reconcile that. My grief was so centered around that, like that irreconcilability between how much she fought and like how that was taken away. And so like, I think for me, grief is always so much, what am I grieving? And what is it that's like sticking with me about the grief, I guess. Yeah.
So when you say that, a thing that I run up against a lot is the injustice of it all, the illogic of it all. And I'm hearing that there. With the new project where you are literally giving people these final last words, is that a response to that? Is that a sense of control?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it, but it is. Like, it is absolutely that, right? And, like, the way in which I've been tackling writing these in the game is very much about letting these characters have control over how they're remembered and, like, what their death means. And I think that control is really is really good. Wow, this is way better than my therapy session.
Yay, we're doing it. Hey, it's cooperative therapy. I tied to this, in the letters from May, you had wondered the only way to avoid grief is to never love, right? And I want you to unpack that one a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, it's so obvious that, like, death sucks because you love somebody, right? Like, death hurts because you love them. And, like, grief is that kind of, like, deep expression of your love for that person or your love for something about that person, right? And so, like, I don't know how to experience grief without that love, I guess. And I'm sure maybe you could, but, like, my deepest grief, like, my realest grief is always, like, it's so deeply tied to just these positive feelings, these good memories, this emotional connection, this love that I have for the person.
I mean, in a weird way, that feels like the thing that is holding all of this together. Earlier, we were talking about Unreal, right? And you don't think about your own death because you're basically a vessel. Like, you, the player, are all alive, and your vessel is whatever, a means of interacting with the game. And the things that you're killing, you have no love for them. They might as well not exist. But it's these things that you can attach to.
Yeah.
That adds the pain. I guess that adds the love, too. Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's a thing earlier that you said that is the million-foot question that I have not been able to get out of my head after hearing about Ambrosia Sky, and then you mentioning this earlier, but it's the question of spirituality. And so in Ambrosia Sky, the main character is a mortuary assistant who is skeptical of the spiritual aspect of cleaning up these bodies. And I can't help but see myself, and I feel like many people in our generation who have left spiritual institutions en masse. I don't know your relationship with the spiritual, but I think it's safe to say, especially millennials and younger, there is a purge. And I'm curious, one, how you see our generation processing death differently, and also, like, how you are thinking about that when designing this game.
I do think I've also had, like, a big falling out with religion, surprising nobody, that I do think is quite common for our generation, right? I think we all grew up seeing a lot of stuff we didn't love about how organized religion created spaces for people to be intolerant of other people and lifestyles. And, like, I'm also a queer person, and so, like, it's hard to reconcile certain things together, right? I think a lot of our generation that has had this falling out with religion because I think of the ways in which we really try to love each other. And this sounds really Pollyanna, but, like, I do think I am a big community person. I spend a lot of time with community, and I think the ways in which we care for each other takes primary over this. And, like, at least in the circles that I run and the people that I know, right? I think it's this kind of, like, communal care that becomes really important in how we respond to death, or at least this is my hope, is that we respond to death more communally, more thinking about everybody together and, like, how we can support each other through death, or how we can, like, make life better for other people. That's something that I'm really interested in exploring, particularly in Ambrosia Sky too, right? Is, like, the community aspect of it. It's not just Dahlia coming home to this place and, like, having her own feelings. You're also reading a lot of stories and text logs and things from the people that live there, and how they tried to take care of each other, and how they tried to solve the crisis, and when they couldn't, what could they do? How could they help each other? And so this communal care in the face of death is also something that I think of a lot, and that is a big part of Ambrosia Sky, and that I think does come from being potentially a millennial that has had a falling out with religion as well.
Who do you think the audience is in that case? Because this is not a small project at all. 20 years ago, there were not games made about this topic. Who do you think is coming to this, and who is going to connect with it?
I think there's a lot of things for a lot of people to connect with in the game, right? Like, it is really also mechanically crunchy, right? With, like, the cleaning and the progression loop and the story. I think we've intentionally tried to make it open for different types of players to really be able to come to it and engage with it and find something to see themselves in it. I think people who like games with crunchy mechanics and interesting story will find something to really hook onto with Ambrosia Sky. And I think that's kind of the audience that I'm writing for too, right? Is like people who see story as part of every aspect of games. Like, I don't view narrative design as just the words that I write. I also view it as how are the player mechanics expressing character? What are the progression loops saying about our world? I feel like narrative is in every part of the game. People who respond to that sort of stuff, I think, will find a lot to respond to in Ambrosia Sky.
One last question.
Yeah.
And going back to, again, this letter series that you wrote, I think that's what interests me a lot in games, how we're able to give death so much weight and presence so that death doesn't necessarily feel like the end of the story for some characters. What do you mean when you say it doesn't feel like the end of the story?
I was thinking a lot about Rachel Amber from Life is Strange. I was thinking about how she died before the game started, and she has been dead the entire time of the game, but you get to experience so much of her. She feels so alive, right? And the way Chloe talks about her in the flyers that you find where she's the missing person, and like memorabilia you find about her, she just feels so full, and her memory is just so present that it really felt to me like she's dead, but there's still so much about her that exists in this game that you can experience, that you can find, that you can engage with, that just made her feel not necessarily still alive, but still have this presence that was really evocative to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I don't know how to say this. To wrap things up.
Oh, yeah.
We are going to die one day. Are you at a good place with it?
I mean, I don't know. I'm watching a lot of House right now because I think House is it's such an anxiety-inducing show that it's actually really comforting to me, where it's like, I don't know, look at them solving all these weird things, and like, look at all the ways in which we could die, but we don't. I don't know. So the fact that I'm on season 5 of House is probably, the answer is no, but
Yeah, that's a real choice. As somebody with medical anxieties, I watched it a lot in college, and I'm never going to watch it again. It's not going to be lupus until it is.
Yeah.
Wow. I like that I asked that after I kind of already knew the answer. It's exactly what you said. She's worked on these games. She knows the answer. We're all going to be okay.
Nobody knows the answer.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good. I'm going to sleep well tonight. I'm going to avoid planes for a little while. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, of course. This fun is a word. You enjoyed my time.
This week, Patreon subscribers get a bonus act. Why I've been playing a tiny game about dying for half of my life. This is a personal essay about a game I played that got me through a really challenging time when multiple family members passed away, and the years since, where I've gone through a lot, including a miscarriage and some really terrifying medical issues. It's a beautiful piece, I think, and I think you would like it. So if you want to hear it, please consider subscribing to the Patreon. You can do that by going to patreon.com/postgames, and it's $5 a month. It gets you the show completely ad-free, plus bonus acts in every single episode, often extended interviews, and a monthly series called Video Game Journalism 101. A new episode just went live the same day as this episode. It's about previews. It's pretty cool. So that's what would normally be happening here. But I won't hold you any longer. Let's get to the next act. Act 3, the news of the week. Welcome to the month of video game remasters. At PC Gamer, Fraser Brown noted that even by the standards of an industry absolutely obsessed with rehashing its hits, the month of August is uniquely crammed with remasters, remakes, and reimaginings. Before we flip the calendar to September, we will have seen the release of Dawn of War Definitive Edition, Gears of War Reloaded, Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, and Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. There will be no colons left after this month. Anyway, that averages to one remake of a beloved entry of a popular series per week. Wow. Could we see a remake of a game from the 1990s win Game of the Year in the 2020s? Doesn't seem so unlikely. Elsewhere, it was a big week for video game marketing. EA, Electronic Arts for the old heads, held a flashy, multi-day press event in Los Angeles with journalists, streamers, and influencers from across the world in attendance. The beleaguered, you might say, video game publisher has humongous expectations for the military shooter, its PR campaign promising a return to what people loved about Battlefield 4. A report on Ars Technica has claimed that EA has set a goal of 100 million players over the course of launch in an undefined post-launch period. Now, I have lots of questions about that stat. Could it have been a total of 100 million play sessions over a given time? 100 million registrations? It's a funny number. But whatever its veracity may be, it does align with EA's extravagant public push to make this game a super hit. I won't lie, my curiosity climbed from above zero when the announcement trailer featured two things: a comical amount of helicopter explosions and a shot from the exact spot in Brooklyn where I got married to my wife. Last bit of news: the fight for not safe for work games on itch.io and Steam continues. Not safe for work games remain delisted on itch.io. Earlier this year, activist group Collective Shout pushed for the removal of the game No Mercy from Steam. Following its removal, they launched a further-reaching email campaign to payment processors, requesting the removal of a larger swath of not safe for work content that they claim portrays the sexual violation of women and children. That email campaign led to concerns that the payment processors would pull away from itch.io, causing the people who run that service to, for now, delist or de-index all not safe for work content. Players who support not safe for work games, or just are concerned about a slippery slope of censorship in video games, have begun to mobilize efforts to bombard payment platforms' support centers with formal complaints and grievances. At Aftermath, Nathan Grayson wrote an excellent breakdown of these efforts. I will make sure to link it in the notes. And one good correction to make from last week. I noted in that episode that Consume Me, the game discussed on the first episode of Post Games, had appeared to be impacted by this mass delisting, despite not being an NSFW game. Well, according to itch.io, that wasn't the case. The game had never been indexed because the game's page didn't meet the minimum indexing requirements of having an uploaded file. Does that sound confusing? It kinda is, and itch.io team members recognize that. They have said that they plan to update the dashboard tool for game developers to more explicitly show a game's indexing status. It's a small detail, but an important one worth clarifying. And that is the news of the week. And that is a wrap. For now, we have escaped the clutches of death. May you live this week feeling acutely the incredible state of being alive. Next week, the future of video games. That's right. I am answering your questions about the future of the hobby, the industry, and the art form. Have a question about the future of games that you'd like answered? Send a voice note to postgamesmailbag, all one word, at gmail.com. That's postgamesmailbag@gmail.com. Please keep messages under 90 seconds and include your name and your pronouns. That will help me out when I am editing, and I will answer as many of these questions as I can. What do I mean by the future of games? I mean, sure, we could talk small. We can talk the next 6 months. We could talk the next 6 years. We could talk the next 6 decades if you want. Whatever you want to ask, fire my way. But for now, I begin my farewell. A reminder, Post Games supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. They get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners learned about the short but unforgettable game that changed my life and my relationship with death. And each month, Patreon supporters get a video in my ongoing series, Video Game Journalism 101. The 3rd episode goes live on Monday. It's about previews, how they came to be, all the ridiculous international trips that press would go on in the past, the influencer events of the present. It is a fun one, and a juicy one at that. And for Patreon supporters, no ads on anything. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games. Post Games logo by James Barham, theme by Mark Sparling, and a special thank you to this week's guest, Kaitlin Tremblay. And a very last thing, if you like the show, please consider sharing it with a friend or leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcast. It does a huge help for us. For real. It's a small thing. It's a simple thing. It's a hugely helpful thing. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. I am going to go catch a baseball game with my video game reporter buddy, Gio. You are going to go have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week.